You're on the soundboard, just lift up the.
Hey guys, my name is Ben Stone. I live here in Denver with my wife and Kayla, and we graduated about 3.5 years ago from CSU, and we're involved in that process like you guys. So Nate's asked me to talk to you guys about why it's important to go together over why it's important where we're going. And so I wanted to start off by talking about maybe you have the question of how is this strategic? And I just want to start off by saying, if that's your question, you need to back it up, because this is a question not about strategy, but about identity and purpose. And that's because family is an integral part of what it means to be Christian. You might ask, okay, why do you say that? And that's because I believe that family is the gospel in and of itself. And so, again, you might ask, so is the gospel just some big kumbaya moment, or what's going on here? No. I don't believe that. But I believe that the gospel is an invitation from God back into an intimate relationship with Jesus. Or, for you things-oriented people, such as myself, a little easier to grasp, at least from the start, back into a cooperative lifestyle with God. What does that have to do with going together? Well, if being in family with us is all about, if being in family is what it's all about, then pair that with our identity as image bearers. What does God do? Then we also do. So, it's God's nature and it's our human design to go together always with both God and man. Alright, so why not just go with God alone? Isn't that good enough to just be connected in family that way? And how do we know that imaging God isn't just about me and God? Why does it have to deal with other people? I would say that it all goes back to Genesis, my favorite book of the Bible. So I think God really paints our identity, our core root identity in this book, and that's why I love it so much. And so just to start, we see our first example of this in the fact that God says, let us make man in our image, which is to paint this really obscure but really beautiful image and picture of the fact that God is in a relationship with himself. He's not just all alone. Second is, it is not good for man to be alone. So that's also really important, is that God says it right there in the garden after he created us and everything was good. It is not good for man to be alone. So there you have it. Another thing that's really cool is, I already like this one. So, what exactly did sin do in the garden? Well, it severed connection between not only God and man, but it's really clear that it also separated a relationship between mankind. So that is to say that if sin did both those two things, then salvation should do the reverse of both of those things. And then you can go even further into the mandates of the Lord. And so, the first mandate of the Lord is to be fruitful and multiply. And as you know, it takes two to tango. And to rule over the earth and subdue it. Now, that on its face doesn't really speak about going together, but it's actually during this time that Adam is living that out when he's naming the animals that God decides to say, it is not good for man to be alone. So that piece we talked about earlier is actually inserted right here in the midst of our work, where even in our work, we're not meant to do it alone. All right, so even after all of that, didn't Jesus leave his family in order to bring us salvation, and shouldn't we be copying him? That's a great question. Well, Jesus did leave heaven, but he never came here alone, obviously. And as for human companionship, Jesus taught and preached his coming, but he always had his disciples, his inner circle, and most of all, his favorite, John. Jesus wasn't afraid to really be intimate with people, not just corporately and not just this ambiguous spiritual sense, but really intimately, to the point that he actually had the one whom Jesus loved, John. It's beautiful. Jesus sent them in twos to preach the kingdom of God. Not even Paul went alone to bring the gospel. And you might think, why is that? And I think it's because he understood that discipleship is not the gospel. It is a response to the gospel. The gospel is the freedom to live into the fullness of what God made for us, which is togetherness and cooperative living everywhere and always. It is said that we do best to live our lives at the speed of creation. If God won't even live alone, what makes you think that you can? You are, in the most beautiful way, limited to living a life in community. Now, even though this is what we're called to, we also need to realize that there's a lot that comes with living together. So by accepting this and choosing your friends over a destination, you're going to have to continually surrender your vision to each other, surrender your rights, actually trust one another in true humility, and repent and forgive always. So, go together and go somewhere, but go together.
That's Ben Stone. Ben was a student with us for years. He got his engineering degree here from CSU, and then him and about 12 of our alumni decided to go to Denver together and start to plant a church together, just as engineers and teachers and friends. Two of them actually bought a house together, or bought houses in the same neighborhood, and other ones decided to just live in that house. So that's just kind of a cool example that they have of, we talk about this idea of it's more important who you go with than where you go when you graduate. They say that the most important thing to your eventual success and happiness in that future success is based on the quality and the quality really of the relationships in your life. And how cool it is when we find that the relationships in our lives from college, one of the easiest times to create really meaningful relationship, continues past just college and keeps going from there. So I've got this weird echo thing going on. Yeah, what's that? Yeah, I'm not really sure either. So yeah, I guess. Hello out there. So maybe I'll just not do this. It's still going through online, right? So you guys can hear me, and then we don't have to keep hearing me in the echo. So, but we are continuing our conversations about finding people, and today we're going to be doing a couple classes just on how to reach the strategic student, and who is the strategic student, and what's the difference between lifestyle of ministry and intentional outreach, and kind of diving into like the idea of lifestyle as ministry a little bit more. But I want to start with, really why we exist is as a ministry is to make disciple makers. That's kind of the heart of why we're there. But even a step past that is we're here to try to transform our campus. Right? That's our heart, is we want to see our campus come to love Jesus. And to do that, practically, we dream of the day when CSU would have enough of a witness on its campus to say that every student is relationally connected to someone who's fighting for them, right? Not just like, hey, I know of a student who's a Christian. That's not what we're talking about, but like someone who is actively fighting for them. And Brent and I have actually done the numbers. We've crunched, how many people they say in psychology, like how many relationships you typically have, and how much overlap there would be, and how many people are already in other campus ministries reaching out to the campus. And we've quantified all that. But if you said like, hey, what would it realistically take to see our university transformed? One of the ways you could say that, this is big picture kind of thing, almost too big to handle almost sometimes. But the big dream would be that you would have probably take about 600, a little over 600 small group leaders to say that between the ministries that are already reaching out to us, that we would have a connection with every person on the campus in an intentional way. Now, we just had a small group leader who's an RA talk with another RA who's not a Christian, not part of any campus ministries, and just this week he made the comment, I just thought it was really funny. He said, if you don't know somebody in the outpost, are you even a CSU student? I thought that's kind of cool. It was just some random RA who isn't a Christian, and he's like, yeah, if you don't know somebody in Chi Alpha, then I don't think you go to CSU. So obviously, like, who we are is out there, but we're not in that sense fighting for every person on that campus. And so what would that look like? Well, one of the ways that we can do that is did Ileana talk about faithful discipler versus super evangelist? Do you guys remember that? Right? Well, practically, on the back side of your page there is just kind of a practical breakdown of what it could look like, or what does that actually look like in real life. If the average CSU student has about 2 years, plus or minus, some people become small group leaders with us when they're seniors, some of them as sophomores, some people take a victory lap or two, some people do the internship and stay even longer. So, whatever, but yeah, come on, Ryan, woo. But whatever case, if you said on average you had a small group leader for about 2 years, and that small group leader was a faithful discipler, and through their finding people to fight for who they fed, the kingdom of God, through that they found 2 people who were ready to take on responsibility in their own life, which would be about the equivalent of like 1 person a year. If on average about 1 person a year you raised up, some years you might have nobody, some years you might have a number of people that kind of all happens together. But on average, if a small group leader has an average of 2 years, and on average every year they have 1 person they raise up as a disciple maker themselves, then in about 7 years we would have enough people on our campus to relationally connect to every person on the campus, taking into effect size of how many people would overlap in that, and then taking like how do you reach the edges of the campus and all those kind of things. So just kind of real practical for you accountant types or your business types, like, hey, this is sort of the mindset. So that is one of our kind of goals for a small group leader. It is not the central goal, but a goal that we talk about is have a vision for the idea of replicating twice before you graduate. This at some level, we talked about like the metrics of success. One is just, are you expressing love to Jesus? That is the highest form of success, because you can produce fruit and never express love to Jesus, and Paul says you're like a clanging cymbal. a gong, right? You look good, but there's nothing there, right? And so we express love, but as that expression, then we do what we can do, right? And there was, a couple people in the Old Testament that God basically said, like, hey, if you do what I tell you, then whatever they do is on them. But if you don't do what I tell you, then their blood is on your hands, right? So there's sort of this idea of like, you do what you can do, and sometimes it bears fruit, sometimes not. And that's okay too. So are you doing what you can do? But Jesus' command, go and make disciples, is this idea that there is the expectation within us that we're going to see effectiveness, that we're going to see fruit as we fight for people in our world. And so, practically, again, this is not the most important thing, but practically thinking like, man, it would be so cool if I could have a legacy in Chi Alpha after I graduate. And a way to think about that practically, like, okay, 600 small group leaders or whatever it is, that's a lot to kind of get my head around. Well, I'm just talking 2. That's what we're talking about. And that's how you can kind of sink that into practicality. But in 7 years, you go through college, if you're a freshman, by the time you finish up your PhD, we could have CSU, transformed. So that's just the idea. But why there? Well, you kind of get to these ideas of like tipping point. Anybody ever hear like tipping point? When you get to about 15-18% of a market, the market tips in your favor. It becomes such a cultural norm. First time I saw an iPhone, I thought it was the silliest thing in the world. It's like, you spent how much money? My laptop can do way more than that. Second time I saw an iPhone, I'm like, let me see that thing. That's kind of cool. Played with it. Yeah, that's cool. Still a waste of money, but that's kind of cool. Third time I interacted with it, it's like, okay, that's really cool. I want one, but I'm never going to spend the money on it. About 4th, 5th time I kept interacting with it, I was like, I got to have one of these. Got to have one of these things. How much do you pay for this? Right? People are like that with Jesus. You know what the average person's thought of Jesus is on our campus? That's stupid. You spend how much time pursuing Jesus? You spend how much of your life thinking about him, joining a church or spending time in the Bible, or that's just a waste of time. And the second time they interact with somebody, the third time, the 4th time, and eventually that, if Jesus really is as beautiful and as transformative and as amazing as we say he is, the more they begin to interact with him, the more they'll come to realize his intrinsic worth. But it takes a journey of experiencing him. We'll get to that when we get to fighting for people. But so that's just kind of practically how we can do that. So we exist to transform our university by making disciple makers. How do we know when we have done that? When every CSU student has someone that's fighting for them. And you can kind of see a practical example of faithful discipler in our context on that back page. So some resources for you guys in the days to come is on our website. We're actively working on this, but this is our website. If you go up there and then click resources, that was from the home page, click on resources, there's a number of tabs here. Depending on if you're using a PC or a Mac, it kind of looks a little different. But if you go down, keep going down. Yeah, CMIT. Yeah, Ryan's excited, or Sam's excited for that one. But you go up to here where it says Small Group Leader Resources. This is here for you guys in the days to come. When you're past LTC and you're like, yeah, I know this, but where am I getting hiccups, or what do I need to impart, or hey, I've got my weekly meeting tomorrow night. What do I talk about? This is here to just help you guys through that. Sam, you might go up to just do full screen on that up on the top. I think it might help it. We'll see. Go ahead and click that. Oh, that was interesting. Maybe that wasn't what I thought it was. Oh, yeah. Say it's not responsive. That's weird. The internet in this building here is horrible, so we'll see how Sam figures it out here. But if you go up there, so go ahead and click the big full screen again up there. That should get you back. And then Austin's small group. It's Austin's right now. It's still a little bit in the beta realm. Okay, well, it's
Yeah, it's trying to load. So go ahead and go down. Just go down. All right, so go back up slightly. There's three things on this page, and we just want to kind of show you guys so you are familiar with it in the days to come. But it looks better than what
We can make it look like right now. It's trying to load.
But the first thing is, how do you create and lead a small group? Now that's essentially what we're doing here in LTC, but on this page we have it broken down really even more than what we can sometimes do here in this class. There's surveys that you can take if you're into that kind of thing to kind of help you think through, like, what should I be focusing on right now in my discipleship, and where in fighting for, and feeding could I grow. But you go there, then the next page down, just keep going down. So it's finding behaviors, keep going. Fighting for, feeding, keep going. The second area is what convictions to impart to your small group. So this is, we talked about KPR and kingdom relationships, personal walk with Jesus, and responsibility. Those are the three expressions. We call those kind of our core convictions. Those are the three expressions of Jesus' commands, that the greatest commandment was to love God. This is how we love God, is through KPR, and we talked about the three core values of our ministry a couple weeks ago. And then responsibility, which is what you guys are learning to do here. All right, so keep going. But those have resources for small group leaders. If you want to talk about your personal walk with God in small group, it has a number of resources there. The third area is how to impart convictions in your small group. And so these are kind of culture creation concepts. And this helps you think through, okay, if I want to impart a deeper value and love and understanding of prayer into my small group community, well, how do I go about emphasizing prayer in their lives? And so what we consider, what we say, and what we do have to do with those questions. What are ways that we create the convictions in someone's life that we're trying to create through KPR, which is what we're trying to do as we have found people who we have fought for and now are feeding in our small group communities. Go ahead and go up, Sam, to Find, Fight, Feed. Just go ahead and click over there. Yeah, so go down. You watch Brent. Go down. Okay, just click that. That'll take you. This is the page for Find, Fight, and Feed. You can just kind of click on it to take you down to whatever part of the page you want to talk about. But all right, so go down to finding. All right, so why finding matters. We kind of talk about just the basic idea there. Who you're looking for, we talked about that. Somebody who's okay with you, Jesus, in your community. They have to want one of those. Talked about 6 steps to meeting someone new. Keep going down. Start by filling your capacity with finding. We mentioned that briefly. Now let's click on express a lifestyle of ministry to your larger world. Yeah, go ahead and click that. Should have opened up below you. So keep going down. So there's 2 kinds of ways that we reach out to our world, and one of them is by intentional outreach, and that is where we've talked a little bit with you guys about how we typically think through finding, fighting for, and feeding people the kingdom of God. Now, that we will get back to in a little bit, but we're going to go there for the next class. So on the bottom of each of these, you can click on them. It's got a bunch of resources for you. Sam, go back to the bottom of the page. Go down to the very bottom of the page. Very bottom of the page. All right, go to core convictions. All right, so when we talk about fighting for people, what we're fighting for is for them. When we're finding people, we're trying to find people who are okay with us, Jesus, in our community. We're trying to find that in people, and then we fight for them to experience us, our friendship, our community, and our God, Jesus. And we'll get to that here in the next couple of weeks, start talking about fighting for. That's really kind of the secret sauce of Chi Alpha. And then feeding is, now we've taken from them experiencing our community to now expressing the convictions of our community. So, go down a little bit here, Sam. Keep going. Yeah, so this here, if you click on, I don't know, just click on any one of those. Go down. We got sort of maxims, and if you hear us talk about maxims, like what's a maxim? It's a short, pithy saying that basically encapsulates a principle. It's almost like a proverb, but it's shorter, and it's something that just kind of it helps contextualize what we mean by something. Sometimes it's definition. We'll say things like, love is selflessly choosing for the highest good of another, right? Or sometimes it's a principle that we work from, like God wants to do through you what he has done in you, in your life, what you've experienced in his life, or in your life, he wants to do through your life. So just have some maxims. These are like small group leader resources. So if you are trying to do a small group meeting on this idea, you go down, it's just got some one-on-one or small group content. It's got some scripture verses. It's not meant to be exhaustive. No, go up, Sam. It's got some practical challenges you could give. This one's needs to be updated, or it needs to keep going. Keep going down now, Sam. Keep going down. Yeah, I don't know, go to like marked by salvation or something. So creative ways to lead a meeting. Keep going down. Some scripture verses you could reference. Some questions you could pose. Some practical challenges you could give. Keep going. Some resources for ongoing reading or thoughts related to that. So we'll keep updating that, but the idea here is there was kind of a funny analogy from some years ago. A bunch of researchers went to Iran, and they did a study on cat food commercials. Did I tell you guys about this? Yeah, okay, so the cat food commercial idea, right? The outline, right? So this is basically just an outline. We're not trying to say, here is what you have to do, but we are trying to say, here are some resources to help give you sort of a baseline to work from. And what we are saying is, in your discipleship, we would like you to emphasize, especially in that personal walk with God section, to highlight each one of those attributes of having a personal walk with God at some point in a year. There's about, I think, 14 of them. And for some, it's going to be emphasizing at different times different things. If you went up to the first one, you can take a survey. Go up to the first one on personal walk with God. So go up to the first one on personal, right there, go down. Area 2, personal relationship with God. Go to belief in God. This is just the beginning of this one too, but keep going down. So belief in God, you may not need to emphasize that with the Christian kid who is in your small group, who grew up in church and they already are there too much. But keep going down. But keep going. But if you got all kinds of thoughts here on how can God allow suffering, and maybe you've got somebody that's really wrestling with that after last week's Boulder shootings, and so here's some resources, here's some podcasts, here's some books that you guys could reference, look at, articles to read to kind of help you think through that one, former sermons that we've done, those kind of things. So these are just resources here for you guys to utilize as much as is helpful, but the idea is to give you that baseline to work from and that outline to resource you as you're trying to impart the convictions of the kingdom of God into their lives. All right, so that outline I've given you guys, can I see one of those? What? Basically, this here is just, I want to run through the basic structure of our ministry. And so we have this example of the snowflake, right? No two snowflakes are the same. Maybe they are, but we're not totally sure. So, sounds like something your mother told you when you were a kid. You're special because you're unique, which is sort of we're special because God loves us. The idea that we're special because we're unique is creating a lot of tension in our culture because of the challenge between sameness and diversity. But it's sort of like the outline, right? It has basic structure, and every one of your small groups is going to have a basic common structure. But how do you create that, and how you express that, and what their needs are is going to be sort of unique to each one, right? It's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little nuanced, even if they're loosely the same size, made up of the same material, expressing the same essential attributes of the fundamental nature of physics. That in some ways it's always going to be a little different too. But in your small group, we basically are trying, in our ministry, we are trying to help you guys reach your potential in your discipleship, really through everything that we do. And so that includes things like programs that we run. And so our large group, right, or our Outpost Live, nothing's large. It's COVID year. Nothing's large. Everything's small. It's tiny. Nobody's there. Outpost Live, in our ministry programs, when we talk, we actually have a whole kind of department, if you will, in our ministry. And our Outpost Live is one of them. The idea of that program, that's not seen as something independent of small group discipleship. We have found that they've actually found in movements, in the study of movements, that three things are essential. One is strong ties, is what they call them, like this tight-knit community that have a deep sense of connection and reliance on one another. And they also need weak ties, which is like a broader community identity that they identify with. And that actually the weak ties, the larger community, sometimes creates more culture than we ever thought, because it's when the small group leader in their relationship fighting for this person builds this relationship that they're really wrestling through questions of faith and how to live out their faith, and then they come to, say, Outpost Live and hear the proclamation of the words, that relationship takes on more intentionality and more deliberateness, because now they see those weak ties of other Christian students actually loving Jesus and raising their hands and worshiping God and responding to his word. Like the community of belief is what they call it. Not even talking a faith concept, but just the community of belief is highly impactful to a person's development and spiritual development as well. And so we're trying to create a stronger connection to our larger community, and to also create a sense of conviction creation through the example of the larger community, but also through the proclamation of the word. Like the way that you're going to lead a weekly meeting in your small group or have a conversation, a one-on-one, is going to have a different approach to how you communicate truth than what we can do in front of a pulpit on a Wednesday night, for example. And so there is a unique aspect of that to utilize. And we actually assess how good our large group is based on our small group, based on things like how well did that help our small group leaders that week have meaningful conversations. And that's one of the things we look at, is like how many times we hear small group leaders say, that really helps me have a conversation that we needed to have, or that really broke something in them and I'm able to take them further now because of that. So everything really works around you guys at the center as disciple makers trying to help you. Retreats and conferences, really the same idea. It's the same concept. We're trying to create community, larger community identity, and convictions that often come from unique moments, memory-making type moments. Outreach programs, things like we do, like Welcome Week, of course, is huge to just help you guys find people. We'll talk about that in the next class. On-campus presence, ongoing finding is really the agenda of
of that. So, of course, you guys have been doing some stuff this last week with outreach, but we do things throughout the semester on kind of ongoing on-campus presence outreach to our campus, and you guys are there. You don't have to participate in those things, but those things are there to help you as you're trying to find people to fight for. Chi Alpha I, things like reaching out to international students or youth recruitment, where we're actually doing things to try to connect with Christian high school students that we often hand off to you guys to fight for. And so all of these things are basically here just kind of helping you try to find people to fight for. Our sending programs, even like our CMIT, of course, it's just trying to train the next generation of ministers in how to reach out to the campus and beyond. Even our missions program, think, well, how does that connect with me? Well, practically, one, if you can bring your guys or gals to a missions trip with you, that's a huge memory-making and bonding moment. I mean, that's worth like a whole semester of one-on-ones, just 1 week of missions trip. But it also, for your young Christian guys or gals that you think, hey, they might be interested in LTC, this is a great opportunity for them to experience responsibility that's low challenge, high invitation. And so it can be a great space to kind of get people's feet wet in responsibility sometimes. So do like a Christmas break missions trip or things like that. College transitions, just trying to help people learn to be disciple makers for their life. Leadership rhythms, Sunday leadership is about responsibility. Sunday's meetings are really focused on trying to help ongoing resource you in your role in discipleship. What we're starting to maybe call D time, just discipleship time. It's where your cohort gets together. Next year you guys will be in a cohort, be like 3 to 6 maybe, in your cohort of other small group leaders. Probably more like 3 or 4, more often. And you guys will just get together once a week. And there's 2 kinds of relationships. There is parent relationships and peer relationships. And parent relationships is basically what we're inviting you guys to do as small group leaders. Now, you're not going to be a parent. I know you're like, I'm 19 years old. I can't be a parent to an 18-year-old. But in the sense of like, hey, you're creating a community around your life, and you're taking responsibility for their spiritual journey. That over my dead body, are you going to live a stupid life? Right? I'm taking on kind of that parent type relationship of just saying like, hey, we might be peer friends, but I am fighting for you in the way that as a parent would, for their children, trying to fight for their future. So there's that, but there's also peer relationships. It's like people in the room here, and people that you do in your small group with. And what we find is they often talk about like the parent relationship is critical. How your mom and dad, what their relationship was like, is largely going to be what you think of as what a marriage relationship looks like once you get married. It's not how they treated you, it's how they treated each other that will affect what your baseline is going to be when you get into marriage. Now, that's not fatalistic, right? But it's saying that is going to be the baseline that you have to work from. And in premarital counseling, we often talk about that. It's like, we actually ask a lot of questions about what was your parents' relationship like, because there's going to be a lot that you're subconsciously drawing from in that. When we talk about you trying to create a community, we oftentimes find small group leaders say, I have a lot of relationships. I have great one-on-one relationships with everybody in my small group, but they have no relationship with each other. That can be a common thing. You know why? Because they know how to have a parent relationship, but they've never modeled a peer relationship in front of them. Now, that's an over absoluteness. That may not always be true. But oftentimes, what we can find is in that situation, if you guys never saw the cohort or the resource group or the brotherhood and sisterhood that your small group leader has in their life, if you never saw that, or you never hear them talk about that in the way they honor those other people, in the way that they love them, in the way that they do life with them, if you don't experience that, then you don't know how to have that in your small group community. And so we do things like of course, D group, but then weekend hangouts and all kinds of things next year will be focused on, based on cohort approaches, to say, hey, create space where you just focus on loving each other and loving the other people in your cohort. And through that, invite your small group guys or gals into that space. That's how they're going to learn how to be community in your small group, by modeling your community with each other. We do retreats before the semesters. That's just kind of there to kind of get everybody on the same page, helping you guys think through and strategize how to reach out and how to feed your friends in that season. And then, of course, your small group has a weekly meeting, one-on-ones, and personal time with them, which we'll get into all that later this semester as we talk about feeding after spring break. So there's just kind of a basic outline. Every one of your small groups is going to look slightly different, and what you need in your discipleship is going to be slightly different. And we're here to resource and equip and help and walk with you guys, because ultimately we want to see you guys succeed, because we want to see this campus loved well. But while this is a little bit of the outline broadly, and I could go a couple hours to really break down the nuance of how the ministry runs, this is just a basic picture to show you guys, like, really everything in our ministry works around trying to resource, equip, help you guys in the idea that we're making disciple makers out of you if you journey with us and let us help you along the way. And what that looks like in your life is going to look different, because I had a bunch of fraternity brothers in my life, and you may have a bunch of lost friends, and you might have a bunch of Christian friends that are in your small group, and how that looks will be different based on what they need and who you are and the novelty of your situation. But the ministry as a whole is here to really, in a big picture sense, give you sort of that structure that your snowflake can grow from. All right, I know, cheesy, so cheesy. All right, let's take a break. Let's stop for a few minutes. We're going to jump back in here in, let's say 10 minutes. We can jump back in here. Take 10 minutes. 7:55, 9 minutes. 7:55, and we'll jump back into some stuff.
Oh no, I do know I can get it. I literally feel like this is what Dad might feel like. Yeah. Watch me win.
Yeah. Push some buttons. We'll see how this works. Years of ministry, I should know better than to just assume anything. I never tested this before we got going. That sounds good. I don't know what you did, but it was definitely one of those filters you put on for like music and like singing and stuff. Oh, nice. Okay. Yep. Remember which ones were on? We might want to put them back on when we're done. All right. So Sam, we'll start with that website on finding in ministering to your larger world, and then we'll jump to the slides that you got. Sound good? Thanks for keeping up with me here. I don't know why I have this in my hand. Yeah.
Turn the music back up. We want to rain.
You're about to start up.
2 minutes. All right, everybody, why don't we go ahead and start sitting back down. Fastest 9 minutes in history, I know. All right, so when we are talking about kind of the maxim that we work from in small group leading, just as a big picture sort of way, like find, fight for, and feed people, we find on the flip side there is the idea of how do I reach out to my world, because it's sort of different. Intentional outreach is like mission trips. Life of ministry is like your classmate. And so we think about it slightly different. So I want to talk about that for a few minutes, but I want to start with with an example of kind of transgenerational discipleship in our ministry. Another story of that, little narrative there. But the original teammate, one of the original teammates that pioneered with me years ago here at CSU his name's Josh Nicholas, and Josh was one of the coolest guys at Sam Houston State's campus. He was part of like the largest fraternity and was the rush chair for it. So if you ever were in Greek life, I was like, rush chairs were the guys who were like the coolest guys because you wanted them to become the face of your fraternity. And he was reached by probably like the nerdiest guy in the Chi Alpha at Sam Houston State, which is just a beautiful picture of you don't have to be like, the nerdiest guy reached the coolest guy and completely changed his life, because he loved him. This is what J. Nick would say. He said that Chris Scroggins loved me in a way I never had been loved by a guy, somebody in this life. And so it changed his life. Well, he became a Christian, got discipled in Chi Alpha, did the internship with me. I said, hey, would you like to come with me and help me try to reach Colorado? And he said, yeah. So he came up here, and one of the first guys he met was this guy, Daniel Frank. And Daniel was somebody who was a Christian young person, and he came to college just trying to figure out, like, how do I live out my faith now that I'm in college? And Janik met him with like kind of intentional outreach, just going out on campus. I think it was during Welcome Week, like moved them into the dorm and off they went. And they built this friendship. Well, Daniel was like, man, I want to be a small group leader. So he was kind of our first generation of students that became small group leaders. And then he reached out to this guy named Matt Hirschberg, and this was just kind of through lifestyle of ministry, if you will. Matt was a guy that was in his dorm with him their freshman year, and they just kind of were friends. And Daniel just started like ministering to this guy, Matt Hirschberg. And Matt had some history with the church, but was basically, I think he was even dealing drugs at the moment in the dorms, and was the kind of guy you didn't want to see late at night in the alley, if that makes sense. Like, he was really into martial arts, and he was tatted up all over, and just kind of had this vibe that you're like, I don't know if I want to, like, but through Daniel's pursuit of him, Matt would give his life to the Lord and just had this beautiful joy of the Lord. I mean, here was this guy that looked like he could be really rough guy, and as soon as you saw him, it just kind of, your fear of him, if there was any, just kind of went away, because he just would smile, and there was just kind of this glow in his life from the Lord and the love the Lord had given him. But he reached out to this guy who, through intentional outreach, who didn't really have any church history at all, Alex Olvera, and his parents didn't go to church or love the Lord. He knew nothing really about the Lord, and came to college, and through Matt Hirschberg reaching out to him, Alex would give his life to the Lord. He became a small group leader for us, and just had a very impactful ministry of faith, if you will. He would just go out there and pray for people, and the Lord really used him a number of times. But he started ministering to a guy named John Grimes, and John was one of many who, through this narrative, but John also became a small group leader for us, did LTC, and it was a combo of people. I believe it was John going out during like our challenge to go pray for people. He met this guy, Emmy, who I think a couple other Outpost people knew from their classes. So it's sort of a combo of intentional outreach and life of ministry. Brent prayed for her at one point. I think Alex was connected to her. But she was a self-proclaimed queer on the campus, and she was supposed to become the vice president of the LGBTQ community. But she had a limp. She had a sort of a degenerative disorder in her leg, and she walked with a cane. And they prayed for her. And later that day, she was walking down the stairs over there by the library, and she said it was like she fell to the floor because
suddenly something was doing physical chiropractics on her leg, and she could feel her bones and her body like twisting and snapping and adjusting, and her cane flew away from her hand, and she was just like, what just happened? And she stood up. She never needed the cane again. She never used it another day in her life. She was just a fun story. I learned a lot through watching her journey, because she gave her life to the Lord, got into Jennifer's small group on the campus, if you guys know Jennifer Talley, and through that just became infatuated with this God who had invaded her life. And she wanted to reach out to her LGBTQ community, and we were like, that's awesome. She still didn't really know if she believed in the biblical perspective of gender and all that kind of thing, and so we had these really interesting conversations, but we felt like the Lord was in it, so we let her go through LTC, even though she wasn't going to be able to be a leader with that worldview. And she got filled with the Holy Spirit, totally rocked her life. And at the end of LTC, we were doing our exit interview, and she said, Nate, I don't believe in this lifestyle anymore. And she went straight from that interview and went to the LSC and told that department that she couldn't be their vice president because she loved them, but she wanted to fight for God's perspective of them, not their perspective to the world. And so, she started reaching out to people, and she became a small group leader for us, and then she started seeing some, I know one girl that gave her life to the Lord like that next year because of her witness, and off we go. And so we find that the best small group leaders, if you will, the ones who have the most impact, typically don't focus on lifestyle of ministry or intentional outreach. They do both. They live out a life of ministry, and they find opportunities and contexts to do that. And so when you talk about life of ministry, we'll talk about intentional outreach, or reaching the intentional student here in a little bit, but we're going to start with life of ministry. And we can go ahead and go down. I'm just using the website today as my notes. It's kind of a cheat, but it shows you guys the website, so it helps too. But go right there, back up. Well, I guess you already got it open, don't you? So go ahead and go down. Sorry, Sam. Up, down, no, left, up. Okay, so number 2, life of ministry progression. We typically talk about find, fight, feed. You have to find people who are okay with you, Jesus, in your community, so that you can fight for them to experience you, Jesus, in your community, so that as they commit into your small group, you can then feed them the kingdom so that they learn to express authentic community through your friendship as they fight for Jesus in their life. And so that is typically the way. But when we talk about lifestyle of ministry, it kind of switches just a little bit. And when you're talking about your classmate, you don't really have to find them because they're there. They're part of your life. And whether or not they want you, Jesus, or your community, it doesn't matter. You're going to see them tomorrow at work, right? It's, they're your roommates. You're just with them. You're there. You don't have to find them. But what you do need to do is you need to express a lifestyle ministry, so you actually start with fighting for them. And what do I mean by fighting for them? Well, again, fighting for, we'll get to that in the next couple of weeks, but again, fighting for is you're seeking through invitation and pursuit for them to encounter your friendship and your God and your community. And so for the people in your life, you're looking for opportunities for them to experience that. So you're looking for them to experience your friendship. So are you friendly? It's a pretty simple thing, but are you friendly with the people in your life, or are you just like that person that never talks to anyone and just ignores everyone and wants nothing to do with anyone, right? Are you being friendly? Do they see the joy of the Lord in your life? When it comes to your God, are you fighting for the people in your world to experience, have encounters with your God? I remember years ago when I was doing my internship at Sam Houston State University that there was a student who was in my small group, Darrell, and
he had a roommate who was an atheist. I told this story recently. I can't remember if I told it to you guys or someone else. But, so again, heads no, so maybe not. But we were about to go on a mission trip together. He was coming with me. We were going to go down to Veracruz in Mexico and do some stuff over spring break. And so he decided to fast for a few days beforehand. And towards the end of that week, his roommate basically came down with like the flu or something. And his roommate, an atheist, right? But Darrell said, hey, can I pray for you? And he's like, sure, whatever. And so Darrell prays for him, doesn't think anything about it, no profound, angel appearing in the sky or some, tingling in my fingers or, he just prayed for him and went off to class. Like, have a good day. I'll bring you some soup if I can later. And just off he goes to class. And his roommate caught him halfway from their dorm to where his class was, grabbed him and said, what did you do to me? Because this guy who doesn't believe in God was sick as a dog, and as soon as Darrell prayed for him and walked out the door, it was gone. So are you fighting for them to have sometimes what we call truth encounters or or power encounters? Like, are you communicating the truth of the gospel? Are you looking for opportunities to express the power of God and seeing if you step out, if God would step into that situation, right? So are you giving them opportunities to experience? That was kind of like the story with like Emmy, right? Like, they just prayed for her and she experienced a power encounter that led to her experiencing through a small group a truth encounter that transformed her life through that. But are you looking for people to have encounters with you, your friendship? Are you looking for them to have encounters with your God? And where possible with your community. So, sometimes, invitations to things like, Easter service or somebody's getting baptized, these special things. So sometimes you can, or like, hey, we're just grilling at my house and it's just a bunch of friends. Are you inviting them into that space? So you fight for them to experience you, Jesus, in your community. But then go down. Then you find, as you have fought for your world, then you find people who are ready. You find the people who are ready, and they probably weren't day one. In intentional outreach, you have to filter quickly, because you're just kind of like looking for the ones who want what you're about. And you don't have time, because guess what? That freshman doesn't care. If they don't care, they don't care, and there's nothing you can do about it. You got to keep moving and find those who are ready. But in a lifestyle of ministry, and we need both, because guess what? We can't just rely on reaching the freshmen during Welcome Week. Otherwise, we just choose to write off a huge percentage of our world, the ones who are already wanting that. We do, in intentional outreach, have to filter through and find those ones who are ready. But in lifestyle of ministry, we are sowing into their lives until they're ready. And so then we go into finding, and then suddenly, guess what? Darrell's roommate started coming to our small group, right? Why? Because he was ready, right? Now he's like, what's going on here, right? Because Darrell had been communicating truth in his life and communicating through his life the power of God was manifesting. And then the feeding kind of continues on from there. From there, then you can start walking with them to learn how to express the convictions of Christ and his kingdom and through your life. So that's lifestyle of ministry, right? And that's hugely impactful. And sometimes we can easily want to do intentional outreach because it kind of gives us a box to work in. Welcome Week, I'll do it then and I'll move on and I'll never have to, okay, it's an assignment this week is to reach out to 4 people. Okay, I'll do that and then I'll just forget about that for the rest of my life. Been there, done that, moving on, right? But in lifestyle of ministry, we need both, because in lifestyle ministry, we learn to just live the gospel day in and day out. And it doesn't mean that you need to be constantly overwhelmed by the need, like, I haven't talked to anybody about Jesus today. Although, there's a really fascinating sermon, if you ever have a chance, there's a fascinating sermon
called Born to Reproduce, and it's by the guy who started the Navigators campus ministry, and he had kind of this thing that he had created this habit in his life that he would tell someone about the gospel every day. Like every day he told somebody. And there was this one day he was just really busy and things, he got to bed and he was exhausted and he was just like, I didn't tell anybody about Jesus today. And most of us would be like, it's okay, you're all right. But he was like, no, I have to, he was very intense. He was like, no, I have to tell somebody before I go to bed. So he wakes up, he's like, he gets out and he goes out and he's like, finds a cab. He says, take me to downtown. And he preaches to the cab driver on the way. And he's like, I don't care if you don't want to hear this. I was like, I have to tell somebody, tell you so I can go to sleep. Right? So he's like, just let me tell you this. And the cab driver gives his life to the Lord by the end, right? So the Lord will bless whatever you do. But he had chosen to create a habit of his life that forced him into a lifestyle of ministry instead of just kind of boxing God into these very random and rare moments in his life to do it. So we need that. I think of like my uncle who my biological aunt married, and he became a Christian because he went into the business world. He's a CPA. He went into the business world and realized there was one commonality that he could see within all of the other men in his organization that he respected. He's like, there's a lot of men I didn't respect. There was a few that I did respect. The only commonality I could figure out within those who I respected was that they all seemed to love Jesus. So there must be something about this Jesus. And he started pursuing faith in his life. And he gave his life to the Lord, right? Like, are we expressing the kingdom in our life? I know Alex, I mentioned Alex Olvera, and Alex was really into soccer. He was on a semi-pro team, right? Yeah, so he was actually on a semi-pro team. That was kind of his dream in his life. But being on a soccer team, there was always somebody getting injured. And guess what? Alex would pray for guys every time. It didn't matter. He's like, I just got to pray for you. He just prayed for people all the time that were injured. And he saw some pretty profound miracles in his life, I'll be honest, as a student. Some pretty radical ones. And when it didn't happen, he'd just say, you know what? I don't know why the Lord hasn't healed you yet, but I believe that he can, and I would love to walk with you in your journey, in your life, and talk about the Lord. Would you like to be part of my small group community, right? So he just kind of went there, right? And through that, it's always a combo. The ones who have the most impact are the ones who take advantage of those strategic moments and who leverage a lifestyle of ministry as well. But in intentional outreach, we find people or filter them based on if they're okay with, we're looking for those who are okay with us, Jesus, in our community. And in lifestyle ministry, we fight for them to encounter us, Jesus, in our community, so that we can find them when they're ready to be fed the kingdom of God. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about intentional outreach. I remember Chris Hewitt years ago. He was one of the very first students we met in our ministry. We pioneered was it fall of 08 or 09, and he was out there on the plaza, and they had those sumo suits. You ever played with those sumo suits? Yeah. He was in one of those sumo suits, and this other guy, Mikey Stewart, who we had actually just met that week, but he was coming from a Bible college, and he said, I don't know why I'm here, but I feel like the Lord told me to come to CSU, and I wanted to see if there was a Chi Alpha, and it was like the week that we were pioneering, and he's like, he literally showed up upstairs, so right here, up in Taylor Hall. He showed up the night before we pioneered, because we were doing a little prayer meeting up there, and he showed up. He said, I saw there was something about Chi Alpha at this church. Can I join Chi Alpha? What? Who are you? We haven't pioneered. Come back tomorrow. Like we're just, but Mikey goes out there that week and jumps in this sumo suit and meets this guy, Chris Hewitt, and they become the first Vicarious Life Partners award was to them in our ministry. They were just real close friends
I guess we haven't gotten to the end. Most of you are freshmen. You probably don't know what I'm talking about. Wait till the end of the semester. It's an award. It's a silly award. It's a great award. Yeah, only because Ryan won it one time. Did you? You were nominated. Oh, you were so close. First loser. All right. I've talked a lot this weekend. I start to get tired of hearing my own voice. I start getting wily. Okay. So yeah, basically, off we go, and Chris Hewitt wanted nothing to do with God. He came from California because he wanted to live life to the fullest, and living life to the fullest meant snowboarding on the weekends and partying on the weekdays, and if he was sober enough, maybe make it to the class once in a while. And that was his idea of living life to the fullest. And he loved the way this small group loved him. He loved the way that Josh Nicholas and Mikey Stewart, and we say this little maxim sometimes, people don't care what you know until they know that you care, right? And so that was really true with him. He didn't care what they, in fact, I remember sitting at Wild Boar. Some of you guys don't know, it was a coffee shop just shut down this year, but it was so sad when it did. And I was sitting with Josh Nicholas at Wild Boar, and literally Josh Nicholas was saying this to me. He said, "Nate, can I kick him out?" No, I'm kidding. Not even kidding. End of the fall, he's like, "Can I kick him out?" Because he would come to their weekly meeting and he would just sleep in the corner of the room. Literally, he didn't care. Talk about Jesus. I'm high. I'm going to just crash. He's so distracting. I'm like, dude, but he's coming. He's faithfully participating. You got to just let him ride through this. Something's going to happen. And guess what? It did. He went home for Christmas break, started texting Josh. I'd be with Josh, and Josh I'm getting these texts from Chris, and I don't know what's going on, but he's actually, for the first time, all semester, small group meetings, large group, whatever, everything, didn't care. Suddenly he was asking real questions when we're not around. And he came back, and we were like, what's going on? He's like, I saw all my old friends and realized how much you guys treated me differently. And I'm trying to figure out why. And it was shortly after that, I was preaching, and I guarantee it was nothing that I said, because I was talking about something totally irrelevant to what happened to Chris, but as soon as the worship team came up, he had an encounter with the Holy Spirit and just freaked him out, actually. He was like, "What was that?" And it was about a week later in a living room with the whole small group that had been fighting for him all year, standing over him as he gave his life to the Lord. Became a small group leader for us, did the internship. He's on a firefighting crew, I think in Loveland right now, or maybe in Fort Collins, but in this Front Range area. So we have intentional outreach. So we reach out to people in these strategic moments. And so, Sam, if you've got your slides, whatever there, but there's certain groups of people that we want to reach out to, and it's because there's strategic moments to reach certain people. And one group is just freshmen. Vulnerable? Oh, yeah. Sam was just transcribing some notes from one of the staff guys. Yeah, all you guys are like freshmen. You're like, I know what's cool. Sorry. No. Here's the thing. We find if you try to do intentional outreach to seniors, guess what? They don't care. They've already created their community, and so the only way you're going to reach them is through lifestyle ministry. If you're part of their life and you're ministering that way, but freshmen have this unique need. Like most of them probably don't have a lot of friends, if any, that they're coming for, that they have, especially if they're out of state. You don't have to fight their community, right? They're looking for it. They're looking for that's when they do studies of seniors in high school who are about to head to college. The greatest question in their hearts typically is, who are going to be my friends, right? And so there is this authentic, like, hey, we have authentic community that we're offering. And it's a unique moment. Get them longer. Yeah, they're vulnerable in this, and honestly, in the sense of like, I had a psychology or sociology professor in college say the person you are when you come to college will forever change, but the person you are when you leave college will likely stay the same. And that might be an overgeneralization, it is. But there is a lot about like, hey, a lot's going to happen in that freshman year. And there's just a vulnerability, good and bad, that we're fighting for that generation and fighting against the things that are preying on them as a result, too. A lot of times they're the most open because they're looking for, like, okay, who is God and what am I going to do with him in my life? Their identity is least defined and least formed yet, so there's spiritual receptivity and openness there. Yeah, they don't always know what's cool, right? Sometimes they're the easiest to identify because they're wearing the lanyards for like a month because they think that's still cool. It's great. It's like, I was wearing it last week. More effective to reach the rest of the campus because we get you longer. Yeah, some of you are like, I'm taking it off. No, just we say that just in jest. All in jest. It's all for fun. All right. So freshmen, now there's two groups that you're looking for. Two groups that you're wanting to try to reach out to the freshmen. Now after the first month, guess what? You can't tell who the freshmen are. There's a moment to really reach out, but there's this moment where if we're going to try to transform our campus, we got to reach the freshman class every year because that is the most strategic moment to reach that strategic generation. Now you're going to have lost people. And you want lost people, man. If you're saying, hey, I just want an easy small group, you know what? There's any number of churches that you could probably go to and be, sign up to be a small group leader, and they probably, plug and play you in that, and they're already doing a lot of the work to like get them there. But if you want to transform this campus, we got to reach the lost. We got to reach those who don't love Jesus and get them to love him as a result. Now, the best way to do that is inviting them into your community. So that's why your cohort, you gotta love your cohort. You gotta love your leadership team. You gotta love the peers in this room. Because if they don't see your love for each other, they don't care, not gonna get it from your small group that's full of lost people. Because there's this idea of community of belief. The majority in the room wins. The majority voice in the room wins. And guess what? If you walk in the room and you've got 6 lost people and it's you've lost. The convictions of the community are going to be formed without you. So that means one of two things. Either you have to be the most vocal expression to forge that community, the convictions of that community. You have to be more loving, more honoring, more serving than they are dishonoring in the room, or disloyal, but more even than that is you need to invite them into community where they can see it expressed, and they can see brotherhood and sisterhood expressed well as a result. So you need to reach them, but and that's why you also need Christians. You want Christians, man. They got these. I was a Christian young person, man. If you can get a Christian student fired up for Jesus, they've got years of investment and impartation that maybe has lied dormant in their life, never with an expression or an experience that mattered to them. But man, if you can kick them in the butt, say, come with me, let's do this together, they're the most impactful people that are going to help you transform that small group, help you create that community of belief. And through them, you're going to continue to see the investment that's been put into their life bear fruit as they learn to fight for their friends alongside of you. Another group that is real strategic is Sam, go ahead next. Where you got next? Okay, yeah. Welcome week is a critical time. Classes haven't started yet. We find a huge percentage of our the people that we fight for come from Welcome Week. By no means everyone, but a very large percentage. The largest percentage of the group comes from Welcome Week. and then other outreach things and life and ministry type stuff that guys are doing. But this is where you're going to build a foundation, where you're going to be able to invite people into your life through your classmates and roommates and friends and all those other ones. Yeah, freshmen are the only ones really around. That 10 contacts for every one person, that's I wouldn't even pay attention to that one. That may be true, that may not be. The idea of that is just the goal in intentional outreach is you're like going out there and trying to find as many people as quickly as possible. Like you're gonna filter quickly, and you're looking for those who are open to you or looking for you. Okay, keep going. But Nate, why can't I target other groups? Yeah. But Nate, so that's a whole different conversation, but I'll tell you, I was a frat guy, a football player in college. It is absolutely essential in lifestyle of ministry to be part of those communities if you're going to reach those types of communities. However, I was always competing with the community that was in my fraternity, trying to get people to invest into my small group community. Like, it was always a competition there. And so if you're trying to start from where you build a small group, you start with what's easiest. And what's easiest is those who don't have community, and then you can invite the ones who are looking for authentic community from your life. So start there. Let's keep moving. We're going to wrap this up. Yeah. All right. The other group is international students. The other strategic group that Chi Alpha likes to focus on and try to target intentionally in doing intentional outreach are international students. We have students from China, India. We have Muslims from the Middle East. Are kind of the three biggest demographics of internationals on our campus. And a lot of times, I had a Muslim friend from Saudi Arabia when I was at UNC, and he asked me, Nate, could I have a Bible? Because he had never read a Bible. In Saudi Arabia, he couldn't get a Bible. In fact, the last thing he ever did that I saw him is he found me, he gave me back the Bible because he was leaving the next day for Saudi Arabia. He's like, I can't take this. Right, so oftentimes this may be the best opportunity that they have to experience the gospel is through your life. And the Lord will work through that. I mean, I had a student from Vietnam who told me one time, he's like, Nate, I'm scared to go to sleep. I invited him to come hang out with me over Thanksgiving or something. And he's like, I'm scared to go to sleep. I'm like, why? You're like, 20, you should be over that. He's like, every time I close my eyes, Jesus shows up to me in my dreams and says, follow me. I'm scared to face him. What do I do?
Can't beat him, join him.
Yeah. That's what I should have said. So I mean, oftentimes, we have missionaries who are spending their lives trying to reach out to people that we just get to rub shoulders with day in and day out on our campus. I met the one in the assemblies, this arguably the largest, missions entity here. They had one missionary that was in Saudi Arabia. He's not there anymore. And I met him when he was in Saudi Arabia. One person for the whole country, and he couldn't even stay very long. It didn't last very long. And yet, how many Saudi Arabians do we get to interact with daily, almost, if we intentionally try to? Let alone like the move of God in China and the openness in that culture right now. There's a cultural moment happening in China. In the next generation, more Christians will probably be Chinese than any other demographic. But we can help in the harvest of that country by reaching, and honestly, we reach the elite, which is not bad. Because guess what? We're going to affect the movers and shakers. And if we can reach the movers and shakers, the international students, they're here not because they're in America, because in some way they're probably a certain elite level of their culture, right? They came here for a reason. And if we can reach the influencers of a country, we influence the country as a whole as a result of their life. And so reaching the strategic. But those are kind of the two groups. In intentional outreach, we're always trying to target the freshmen and the international students, and just love them and minister to them well. And as a lifestyle, there's a whole lot of each of those groups who just aren't going to care. And so we have to do a lifestyle of ministry if we're going to see our campus transformed. But as we do both, we'll always have people in our lives that we are fighting for and feeding. And through that, we'll have a harvest in our life of people who love Jesus. And if a couple of them take on responsibility and sit here where you are in a couple of years, we'll keep moving forward and growing the army and seeing the kingdom of God advance as a result for the next class coming behind you. All right, it is 8:30. Just want to have you guys get in with your cohorts here in a second. But does anyone, real quick here, I'm going to ask the cohorts to do this too, but does anybody have just any stories from this week? Like, hey, this was kind of a cool thing that happened, or anything you guys want to highlight as you guys were reaching out over this last week on the campus? Don't be shy. Yeah, go ahead and stand up.
So Austin and I met a guy named Zavi on campus today. He's from Pakistan, a Muslim. And he invited us over for chai this next week.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, anybody else? I know I was out there on Thursday. Eric and I were there, and CSU moms, whoever they are, they were praying. They were out there just praying for random people. So they're doing the same thing you guys were doing, but they just found this guy first, say, hey, can we pray for you? And they brought him over to us, like, hey, are you Christians? And we're like, yeah. And then she's like, this student needs community. Turns out he was a cousin. He was the cousin of one of our former small group leaders. But he had very little history with the church. In fact, I think Eric reached out to our former small group leader, and she's like, you met my cousin? And she called him. He's like, hey. So he's not a follower of Jesus, hasn't thought about him, but had a crisis going on in his life. He was so embarrassed that we kept telling him, it's fine, dude, it's okay. He's like, I don't cry in front of strangers. He's tearing up. He's just completely bawling in front of us. He's like, I don't cry. I don't do this all the time. I'm like, it's totally okay. But he's just having this God moment. And Eric's been able to hang out with him since then, and get him plugged in with his small group. So, we're trying. Anybody else? Anybody want to just say anything that you learned or any experiences that you had from this week? Any last ones? Yeah.
One of our girls got to pray with she was a neighbor of the girl that got stabbed.
Yeah.
Came across her, the Lord led them to each other, and
That's cool. That's awesome. Yeah. Talk about ministering to our world. Okay. So here's the thing. This week's the same. It's just really kind of cut and paste for us. Now, next week is going to be, hey, have a conversation where right now we're really inviting them to bring Jesus up by questions, by inviting them, or by just having a word for somebody or praying for someone like that. Next week, we're going to try to ask you guys to find someone that you can just kind of present either your testimony or just kind of present the gospel a little more deliberately. So a little more just to kind of go there as well. But if you do that this week, that's okay. You can do that. But this week, it's just kind of cut and paste. 4 people, pray for 2, talk about the Lord and have a discussion about God with 2. And oftentimes it's just kind of both and, or whatever. That's totally fine. But the 2 things we're trying to do is, one, we're trying to get you guys to overcome your fear of man. And so just going up to someone and saying, hey, let's talk, and embracing your awkward a little bit, overcoming your fear of man, overcoming your fear of rejection, is honestly, if you experienced more of that this last week, that's awesome. You've succeeded, because we're just trying to get you to learn you're going to have to overcome those things if you're going to be effective on the campus. But we also want you to have good experiences and have expectation. The Lord can use you, and we had some really cool stories from this last week. So when you're in your cohort, ask each other some of those kind of questions, like how did it go? Cohort leaders, get online with anybody that's not here but is watching online. You guys get with your cohort leaders, or if your cohort leader is online, get with them and just talk about, hey, what did you learn this last week? What are you hoping for this week. And cohort leaders, again, we're going to do an outreach on Wednesday. You can let them know Wednesday from 11 to 2 on the plaza. I think same place as we did this last week. We'll be doing as a ministry an outreach opportunity. We want to encourage you guys to create a separate time as a cohort beyond that. We know not everybody's going to make that moment, so trying to get the cohort to make sort of a separate moment or reach out with your people at different times that works for them. And then always feel free to ask your small group leaders if they could help you reach out. And we got a couple of small group leaders that were just out there with some guys this last week, just helping out with their cohort or with different people. So, all right, guys, thanks for the time tonight. And yeah, let's get out there and reach out. And you know what, this is kind of the hardest time of the year because it's like towards the end, right? So nobody's looking for community. And yet we had these, and yet that helps us kind of like overcome that fear of rejection, fear of man. And yet we had some incredible things happen through just reaching out for a few hours here or there with all of you guys. So as we continue to reach out, just have the expectation God is going to work with you and partner with you. And so get out there and let us help you. Let us do it with you. And we love you guys. You guys are at the center of why we exist and what we do. So we're always here for you. All right, get with your cohort and have a great night. Happy Palm Sunday. Oh, and by the way, that can be an outreach strategy is like, hey, Easter is this week, so leverage that.
And you want the rest of these?
Yeah, I'll take those. Thanks, bro. Alrighty.
Thanks for joining us, online people. See you next week.
Where was this one?